Getting married is one of the biggest celebrations you'll have in your life. But between booking the venues, hiring vendors, managing all the little details, it can quickly become one of life's biggest nightmares. In fact, a seasoned wedding planner can start easily at $5,000 minimum spends on their wedding. So $75,000, $100,000 minimum spend. For me, for example, I charge 20% of the total spend of the wedding plan a wedding. So if you have a $250,000 wedding, I charge $50,000 to plan your wedding. But you don't have to do that. You can actually do it on your own. And I'm going to give you the tips and the processes to do that. It wouldn't be possible for me to train you on how to become a professional wedding planner in a 20-minute video. But what I can do is show you how and when to start the process and all the different stages that it takes to have the dream day that you've always wanted to have. As you're watching today, if you'd like to follow along, go down to the description and print out our free wedding checklist download. Next up, we're going to be talking about 5 different points that you're going to want to focus on to make sure that the entire wedding planning process from start to finish is as smooth as possible. The first point we're going to talk about is getting on the same page. I've said this before and I will say it again. The most important, other than the budget, piece of having a really streamlined and peaceful wedding planning experience is for the couple to be on the same page. It doesn't matter if you have hired a wedding planner or if you're doing it yourself. Being on the same page throughout the process is really, really key because it's going to remove the stress. It's going to uncover things that you may not have originally even thought of during this process. Use this as an exercise to be in a healthy marriage. Healthy marriage requires great communication, and this is your first test as a couple to have really, really great communication. Don't be shy, be open, be honest, be clear. That's what you want to focus on when planning your wedding and making sure that you're on the same page. The one thing I want you to consider when you're getting on the same page is the reality of your lives. You may have initially started off planning your own wedding, but then a month in, 6 weeks in, you start realizing the time commitment and the energy and the focus that it's going to take to really plan your dream wedding. At that point, both of you may decide, you know what, we may want to shift our budget around and we may actually want to hire a wedding planner. There's nothing wrong with that at this point. Getting support, as we've talked about in other videos, is super, super important. Now, if you can't afford a wedding planner per se, and you also can't DIY it, see about finding someone in your inner circle that would be willing to take on more of the responsibilities and act as a wedding planner. That person may be your savior. So really look at all of the different options and then have conversations with people. The next point we're going to talk is budget. You've heard me talk about budget. I will always talk about budget. I want you to be dreaming about your budget. I don't care if it's big or small, whatever it is, budget, budget, budget. Anytime you make a decision, reference your budget. It'll actually make your decision-making processes a lot easier because you'll go to your budget and say, oh, we can't afford that. So the answer is no. It's really easy. Don't let your ego get involved in this. Stick to your budget. This is a business. This is one expensive day, and you want to make sure that you're coming out unscathed. First thing you're going to want to do is break down that budget into the categories that are most important to you. We do offer specific guidelines as far as what your budget is and percentages. Accepting money from other people initially sounds like a good idea. It's free money, right? But guess what? Rarely is money ever free. Sometimes it is, but not often. What I want you to do is look at anyone that has offered to help support this event financially, maybe your parents, grandparents, relatives, friends, whomever. Make sure you have a conversation with them about their expectations around that money. Is this free money or is it money with strings attached? Frequently, you'll have an experience where parents might say, we're going to give you X number of dollars. Yet they also want to invite 30 of their friends. And all of a sudden, the money they have given you is really just paying for their friends who you never would have invited to the wedding. So you need to look at that. You need to look and have clear and concise communications with family members and friends that are offering to donate money to your event. So point number 3 we're going to talk about today is finding your vision. This is all part of getting on the same page. Once you've gotten on the same page, you can then take all of those elements and create your own vision. Some people want to have a specific style. Other people want to have a theme. Personally, I am not a theme guy. I think theme weddings are kind of cheesy, but you know what? It's your wedding. You do you. Let me tell you one story though. I had a client a few years ago who they were a couple. One was from the US, one was from China. A bunch of the family was going to be flying in from China to the US. And this was a very prominent family, I have to add. The American side of the family was quite prominent. And when I was interviewing the client, they said, well, we're really into Star Wars and it's November and we want to get married in May. And we want to have a themed wedding that is around the concept of May the 4th be with you. Great idea. You know, more power to them. They're super Star Wars people, whatever that is, not Trekkies, but Star Wars people. And I was happy for them that they could come to this. The reality of doing a themed wedding when you come from a prominent family is that that your family's gonna have some expectations around what a wedding is. His sister had already gotten married and she'd had multiple weddings, one in the States and one in Europe and another one in the Middle East. Each one of those weddings was over $1 million. This wedding, they had a budget of $10,000. They wanted food truck and the theme was going to be Star Wars, May the Force be with you. Not my thing. And honestly, it makes other people uncomfortable. There is a tradition around weddings and you also want to consider what your guests are going to experience. Go crazy with colors, but no themes. My thing is no themes. They date, your photos look horrible in 5 years from now. Your grandchildren are going to look at this and be like, what the hell was going on there? So just be conscious of having a themed wedding. My recommendation is no, but you do you. So once you've got your vision in your mind, you need to be able to communicate this. And one of the recommendations I make is utilize Pinterest. Pinterest is great. You can create a board for each of the different categories for each vendor, but you can also do a board that is kind of the entire mood and colors and all of that to communicate between the two of you and then also between the key players in the wedding planning process. You can also use Pinterest for your attire. You can have a section for you can have a board for attire. You can have another board for your venue styling. You can have a board for your catering and for your photographer. You can have different styles of shots that you want to capture, or different moods, different vibes you want the photographer to capture. You can do this on Pinterest. You can do it on Canva. You can do it on Google Sheets. My recommendation is just do it in one place and clearly communicate that one place so everyone else can use that one single point of contact. So now that I've given you some ideas of where to get inspiration, I want to give you a big warning caution sign. Limit yourself. You can end up going down these rabbit holes and eat up hours and hours of your day. I literally recommend setting a timer on your phone or on your watch, wherever you set your timers, 20 minutes. Stop, ask yourself, have I gotten what I need or do I need more? Then set another 20-minute timer if you haven't gotten what you need and do 20 more minutes, and then stop. Come back to it the next day, 4 or 5 hours later, whatever. Give yourself a break. You go down that rabbit hole, you will send yourself into such overwhelm because there are a million ideas and a million concepts and a million products. Don't do that to yourself. Get clear, narrow it down to 3 items at a time. If you are like me, it's really important for you to do these things. Anyone in the neurodivergent community needs to limit themselves or you will put yourself into complete overwhelm and stress and probably end up getting in a fight with your partner anyway because you're completely overwhelmed. So don't do it. 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. Point number 4, we're going to be talking about booking your venue and your vendors. We don't want you to go into overwhelm. You don't want to go into overwhelm. So here's my recommendation. I've used this with all of my clients and I do it with myself. 3 vendors at a time. So for example, photographer, you're searching a photographer. You're going to want to have maximum of 3 choices. Narrow it down to 3 choices. Once you've started to interview them, you'll be able to compare 3 choices. If for some reason one of those choices doesn't work, you can always go out and find another one to add to the 3, but you always want to keep it limited to 3 to prevent yourself from going into complete and total overwhelm. Questions to ask your vendors when you're interviewing them. Don't be afraid to ask questions and make realistic requests, but also make sure that you are respecting that this person is a vendor. They don't have to work with you. If they're good, they got a list of people. You really want to make sure that all of your vendors you vibe with, that you connect with. And so you really want to make sure that at the beginning, you are being completely and totally honest with them. Don't try and finagle them. Don't listen to some of these bridal conversations on Reddit that say, oh, don't tell them you're having a wedding. Tell them it's a birthday party because they're going to charge you less. That is the best way to alienate someone and never find a vendor that you're going to jive with. And it's really important to jive with all of your vendors. So be honest, be upfront, be respectful, listen to them, ask smart questions. And if you have any other questions about how to talk to a vendor, ask them down below. This is one of the most shocking things I learned through all the weddings and events that I've done. People do not read contract. They don't. It's insane. The contract is your blueprint to a successful event and a successful relationship with each of your vendors. Read the entire contract. If there's legalese in there that you don't understand, research it. Talk to a friend who's a lawyer. Hire a lawyer if it's a big contract and you really want to make sure you understand every little bit of it. Read the entire contract. And if a vendor doesn't have a contract or has a contract that's like this small, that should be a red flag. Read the contract from beginning to end. To give you an example, you may have chosen a specific venue, having no idea that at the end of that list, the end of that contract, there is their preferred vendor list. Now, there's nothing wrong with choosing someone from their preferred vendor list, but how it might affect you is you've already hired a photographer, but they don't allow an outside photographer into that venue. It doesn't really happen with photographers very often, but it does happen with caterers and florists. So you're going to want to make sure that you are allowed to bring in your own vendors, and if there are any associated charges or fees to bring in your own vendors. Sometimes they'll ask you for increased insurance. There's all these different variables. So again, going back to your budget, not asking the right questions, not being completely well-versed on the requirements of that specific vendor can ultimately cost you money. We don't want you to make mistakes like that. It's a waste of money to have to pay extra fees just because you didn't read a line. Read the contract, read the contract. Now we're gonna move into point number 5, which is creating a wedding event timeline. I want you to remember that you are the host for this entire experience. You're gonna have people that are flying in earlier in the week. You wanna be aware of that. You wanna be able to welcome them. You may wanna have lunch or dinner with them. So the more organized you are the week of the wedding, the better off you're gonna be in taking care, in having the opportunity to take care of the people that you care about most, that have made an effort to come to your big day. During this final week, you're gonna wanna schedule all of your final appointments. If there's any last minute fittings, if there's any last minute conversations, if the florist has to swap out a flower because it's not available, those are the things you're gonna wanna check on that week. Since you're doing this yourself, you're gonna be confirming all of your vendors. So having a really clear roadmap that you've been developing from day one is all gonna culminate in this final week. Since you're doing this yourself, confirming all your vendors, making final payments, and confirming timelines both in writing and verbally is going to be really, really important. All the work you've been doing from day one to now culminates in this experience. The more organized, the more efficient, the more clear your communication, the better your wedding week is going to be. So now we're going to move into the actual day of the wedding and what we call the show flow. You're going to develop your show flow, mapping out the entire day from the moment your alarm goes off in the morning in 15-minute increments. There's going to be multiple columns, what you're doing, soon-to-be spouse is doing, what other key players are going to be doing, when vendors are arriving. All of that is going to be on this list. This list will also include phone numbers, contact people. All of that will be in your show flow, your packet for the day. Your day of planner, which you'll learn about, is going to be one specific person that's going to be running this show for you. It may be a professional, but in the case of you doing it yourself, you're going to engage a friend or family member to be that person and run the day for you. So the more clear, the more concise, the more effective the outcome of the event will be. It's going to flow better, and that's why we call it a show flow. So one of the things you want to do is do everything backwards. So if you're going to have your ceremony at sunset, and sunset is actually at 6:30, you're not actually going to do your ceremony at sunset. You're going to do it 30 minutes before sunset or 45 minutes before sunset because you want to have the entire thing done, ceremony complete, so you can do your photos at sunset. Start thinking in this backwards mindset. Determine the time. Dinner is going to be served at 7:30. How long does the caterer need? Well, you're gonna have a conversation with the caterer. What time do they need to be on site to start to unload and start setting up the event? You'll do this with your photographer, you do this with the caterer, the florist, with all of the different key players. You're going to go from the time the specific event happens and work your way backwards. This is also true, you have to consider when you're moving people, for example. If you are getting married at a venue that has your reception in one location and the ceremony in a different location, you need to account for moving, say 125 people, however big your wedding is, from one space to the next. Everyone needs to be prepared for that. If you're gonna have a welcome drink available when people walk into the reception area rather than crowding the bar, which I hate, you wanna make sure that the bartenders are standing there with trays and servers with trays, giving out the signature cocktail. So all of these things, you just wanna think ahead and work backwards and adjust the timeline as needed. So once you've gathered all of this data and mapped out all the timing with all the different vendors, and you've confirmed that everything is going to work, you want to do a final copy of your show flow. That final copy will then be shared with each of the vendors. Make sure that they confirm they receive this as well, both verbally and in writing. And you're also going to want to give it to all the key players in the family and whoever's acting as your day of planner. I also recommend posting a sample of the show flow in the getting ready rooms. So the groom's room, the bride's getting ready room, or whatever combination you have of there. So that's what you want to do, is make sure you have it so people can reference it, so they're not coming to you every 5 minutes saying, when is this? When is this? We want to eliminate both you and your partner from being the contact person for that day. We want to establish that, have other resources where people can go. So someone random can just be saying, oh, let me go check the show flow. And they'll be able to say, oh, you need to be here at X time. A tip that I've touched on before is creating a captain. So for the day of the wedding specifically, you want to assign one person, one volunteer that is preferably an A-type personality that likes to be the know-it-all and loves to direct people. Let them be the go-to person for all questions on that wedding day. We want you and your partner to be able to stay focused on the meaning of this day. This is your wedding. You've done all of the work. You've got everything organized. Now I want you to stay focused on each other and be present for the experience that you're about to take on. So each of the categories we've talked about today are very high level. In reality, there's a lot more detail and a lot more understanding of the process in order to really truly reach the ultimate goal, which is having the wedding day of your dreams. In upcoming videos, we're gonna be talking about all of the points we've talked about today, but in greater detail. So make sure to like and subscribe so you're notified when those new videos come out. I'm Zach Campbell. I've planned over 350 weddings and events around the world. I want you to benefit from my learnings, my wins, and my losses. Make sure to stay tuned because we're gonna cover everything you need to know to create your beautiful wedding day.